Well, hi friends. Welcome to the University of Portland Roundtable, Directors Roundtable. Here today we have, I'm gonna look at the camera. Today we have three of our directors this season. We have Ricardo Guevara, who directed Sanctuary City. You can look at this camera. We have Barbie Wu, who directed You Can See All the Stars. And we have Jenna Tamimi, who is currently directing Pride and Prejudice. Welcome, thank you for being here today. My first question that I'd like to ask is, how do you begin? How do you begin the work of being a director? Ricardo, I'm gonna have you start.
Yeah, that's great. Well, I was very fortunate in Sanctuary City last semester because I had the wonderful help of my good friend Lily Gray Rudge as a dramaturg, and so she and I were able to work together on the background of the show, and that show takes place in Newark, New Jersey, and so we did a lot of research into the time period. It was early 2000s, and also the location and how can we make it look authentic even though we had a low budget and we were in a really small space. How can we make it seem like we're in a very different place? So work with the dramaturg, it was a very great way to start that process.
Yeah. What about you?
I always like to start my process with just having the ensemble come up with a room agreement, because I feel like for us to all have the same set of lexicon that we utilize in the space, where we know where the boundaries and just what the container is going into the work, I feel like is the crucial foundation for me.
Yeah.
I like to keep intertwined, like my identities as a theater practitioner and theater historian who has like a deep investment also in like theater theories. So I also will often take a somewhat dramaturgical like beginning approach when I have a text. Really take the time to appreciate and love and like sit with the words on the page.
Yeah.
Really ask questions like, why here, why now? Why do this play? What can it say to a contemporary audience? What are my hopes and dreams for the audience to walk away from? And then of course, bringing those questions to the cast and making sure that it's a really collaborative process of thinking through like what our goals are, why we want to do this work, why and how it could matter in our current moment.
Yeah, that's great.
I think in every project there's moments, right, that we find that amaze us, that are unexpected, that we didn't expect, and we kind of get the joy in the process of finding these things. So I think one of my questions would be for y'all, what was amazing? What did you find that amazed you in the process?
That's a great question.
Yeah. Do you want to go?
Yeah, sure. I could jump into that. So our rendition of Pride and Prejudice is a devised rendition. So we were starting with nothing but the novel itself and a container of an idea around queer belonging and putting our contemporary selves into the novel. And what was amazing to me were like the ideas that were able to be sparked. So I think there was a lot of fear around going into something kind of from scratch, and it was amazing to see students come together and create, and especially students who are maybe new to theater, and to get to see the diversity of the room in that way, to have like theater majors who are maybe seniors who are quite like literate, right, in this and fluent in the language of theater, and then to see students who are new to theater kind of develop that language, and to see the beautiful ideas that could come out of being new to a space, like kind of for that reason, and to see those two ways of thinking intertwine was really awesome.
And how do you navigate those fears? Because I feel like it's hard in any process, whether it's devised or not. There will be fear coming in from the cast, from the designers, from myself, yourself as a director. How do you kind of get everyone together and to really trust in the process? Because I feel like it's hard.
Oh my goodness, it is so hard. I feel like the first step is to try to also not totally lose myself to those fears, so that I can be like somewhat of a rock for the group, while also still being clear about like my own vulnerability and, you know, showing that we're in this together. I think I once had a very dear professor of mine once told me to make a to-done list, not just to-do lists. So I think reminding everyone of like what they've accomplished along the way makes what's still left to do feel more manageable. And also finding ways to like channel that anxious energy. Like how do we then like take it in and like push it out in ways that can like fuel the project.
Thank you. That's so cool.
How did you all conquer some of those fears?
Yeah, I think like just trusting that I have the right collaborators in the room, right? I feel like because every project is a little precarious at some point.
Right.
Of
You
course.
know, like right before opening, I don't know, sometimes those dress rehearsals just feel like we'll never get there. I'll never get there. Oh my gosh. And I think knowing that we all are telling the same story, and I also really loved what you said about like the different level of like the age range of the students really influence the storytelling of it all. I think just some of our seniors like really leaned in full way, and you can see all the stars, and that was so beautiful. Like I think that's what amazed me the most about the process is just how much people leaned in, even with a reading process. Because I think sometimes stage readings are a little bit like, well, it's not a full production, but they all like gave their all throughout the 3 weeks rehearsal we had, and I really appreciated that.
For me, I think it was really nice that it was a completely student production, and so having a lot of grace, I think, and a lot of patience in that process. We all knew, you know, it was my first time directing a full-length play, and it was some of my designers' first times designing a play, and first time actors having that substantial of a role with that much memorization. I mean, Sanctuary City, it's only 3 people, the cast, and so it's a lot of memorization for all 3 of them. And so there was a lot of moments where I think there were struggles because we were just so new at it, but because we had that similar understanding, that kind of collective experience of we're all going through this for the first time, and in that kind of major way, it made it really beautiful because we were really there for each other in a way that I think would have been different if, you know, it's like, oh, but I'm not as talented or that experience as this person. Like there was none of that. We all knew we were in the same boat, and I think reminding ourselves that, hey, like this is a growth experience. It's all, everything's a learning curve, and like we're all on a very similar point in that curve, which makes it really nice. Nice to do that together.
Directing, obviously a critical role in the process. I'm curious to know what you feel your artistry contributed the most to the process as a director. Like, how did you show up as a director? What do you feel is the most important thing that you bring to the space as a director? And like, how do you feel that your role as an artist informs the work from the position of director?
For me, I felt like having a large background as an actor was very beneficial because the show that I directed, Sanctuary City, was very acting heavy, you know, and it was one of those things where it's like we couldn't be saved by the design, you know, in that sense. It was on the backs of our actors, and so I think having that experience, I was able to empathize a lot with the fact that it's a lot of memorization and it's a lot of emotion and a lot of shifting and stuff like that. And so we were able to have conversations that were really in depth about the acting, and it was a lot easier for me going into that from that experience. And so it's one of those shows where it's like that acting was everything, you know.
Yeah, I think similar to what Ricardo was saying, I think because of my background as an actor, I try to remember what some of my favorite directors would do in the process is by asking questions instead of giving them answers, right? So I will try to come up with these activating questions of, I wonder if, like, this, you know, like, and I end up saying perchance a lot in rehearsals, which I get tallied by my actors, but oh well.
It's a great word.
I felt very lucky that in this specific project in Pride and Prejudice, I'm coming to it as like a deep lover and big fan of Jane Austen. I was my high school's Jane Austen Appreciation Society's president
There you
and
go.
sometimes only member. So I think, especially for this piece, I was able to just bring a lot of love, like just a really deep love and like many years of sitting with the work. And thinking through the work. It's also a part of my like research as a scholar. So I felt so lucky for this project to get to bring that, and most importantly to share it, while also sort of checking like, okay, like, you know, a part of my dissertation got to be my love letter to Jane Austen. I want to make sure that this project is like the students' love letter to her.
Yeah.
And so to be able to bring that love and like pass it off to them. And let them like cultivate their own.
Of course.
I love that. I love that. I think this is always a really interesting question to ask, because I think we are accustomed to talking about the things that we celebrate and what we do. And I think actually sometimes it's very essential to talk about the things that we engage with and the moments that we don't feel as confident.
Yeah.
So I'd love to ask what or when was there a moment that you doubted yourself the most in this process? A lot of times directors will say, like, you can never show any doubt. Otherwise people lose confidence in you. And I think it's a very interesting thing and a different policy about whether a director feels like they can show doubt or whether doubt invites vulnerability from other collaborators. But when was a moment in the process when you, whether you showed it in the room or not, when was a moment in which you were engaged with those big questions about how you were showing up in the work? The silence.
That's a good question. That's a good question.
My experience wasn't related to You Can See All the Stars per se,
Yeah.
but there was one production where I think my designer had originally thought about like, oh, maybe we can do like a 3/4 stage, and I was like, I don't know how to do that. And I think because I also had a couple newer actors too, and I just felt like that would have been so hard for them to navigate that 3 sides of audience, and also just a lot of pivoting that they would have to do. And it was a really big show already, so I just ended up going like, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
I can't make that work. I cannot make a thrust work.
Yeah.
So we ended up doing proscenium. But I don't know. I feel like honesty is a virtue that I hold on very dearly as a human being, and I think it's also a very good modeling of, even though I don't know the answer, we can all figure it out together. Like, I'm not going to panic to the full degree in the room, but I feel like letting my actors and my collaborators know that I don't have all the answer. I'm not the smartest person.
Yeah.
It's breaking down that sort of God and master sort of complex, you know, and I'm for that. So.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. I think being able to be vulnerable is super important, and I think in my process even more so, because I definitely didn't have all the answers. It was my first time directing a full-length play, and so it was great to be able to say, hey, I don't know, you know, and like, and you might know more than me in this case, and like, especially since we were talking about the immigrant experience, we all had our own background when it comes to that, and so it was actually beautiful to be able to say, you know, I can't relate to this specifically, but then someone would be like, okay, but I can say this about that, or, you know, because it was a very intersectional play, and there was, you know, sexuality into it, and there was gender into it, and ethnicity, and immigrant status. Like, people were able to draw from so many experiences, and it was great not knowing all the answers. I didn't want to know all the answers, because then it would have been, you know, inaccurate. You know, so it was actually great to be able to say I don't know. Yeah.
I think like being a few rehearsals in and not yet having committed to any like words to the page, I started to have my own moment of like,
Yeah.
are we going to be able to do this? And I had to sort of slow down and be like, oh wait, what am I always telling them? Like, and I had to tell it to myself, you know, like, keep on, like, keep calm, work on, like, it will come together. And something that like, thank you to like all the partners of theater people who aren't theater people themselves and have to endure it. But like, it always takes my partner reminding me like, you say this every time, right? That you reach a point in every production where you're like, oh no, like, it's impossible, we're not gonna make it. And then like, she's like, and then you always have something.
Yeah.
So yeah, having to feel that doubt and then like use some of my own lessons on myself. Yeah.
Like we have to remind ourselves that this is not our first show.
Yeah,
Exactly.
this is
Like,
gonna
this is gonna be
happen.
okay. Yeah. And we know how to do this.
Mm. Or at least you know that you'll survive it.
Survive
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Right. And then it's all like there will be something to learn and glean from whatever that like final iteration is.
Yeah.
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 On that note, what do you think is one of the most valuable lessons that you have learned as a director, whether that was from another director or whether that was something that you have discovered in your own practice? What is the lesson, or one of the most valuable lessons that you have learned as a director?
Ooh, there's so many good ones. I remember taking a directing class one time, and because I'm an actor, I was like, I don't know how to do this, and you know, like, what if I end up just like acting it out for my actors? And this director was like, that's easy. Don't direct a show that you could be in. And I was like, what a concept. So I think like that is something that I always keep in mind, is that if I feel like I can act in any of these roles, I'm not going to touch that project as a director. And then also just really holding, I mean, like, because we all want to work, right? But I have to be so diligent about, like, do I have a way in? Is this my story to tell?
Yeah.
And if it's not my story to tell, I have to have the grace to be like, you know what? You should find somebody else that would do this story justice.
Yeah, of course. I think for me, seeing a show through the lens of how live it is, I think completely reworked the way I saw theater and then being able to direct it. Because I think as soon as a play looks rehearsed, you know, or it has that same rhythm every single time, then it's like, then it should have been a short film, or should have been something else, you know, and then like the importance of that drops a lot. And so for me, I learned a lot in my directing classes that like keeping that spirit of what theater is and the liveness of it is what makes it so special, you know. And so being able to be in a rehearsal room and look at it through that lens, okay, like is there really that sense of presence there, you know, and like is there that sense of like something different could happen? And obviously like we're going to stick within the script, but like that sense of like not knowing, you know, and the audience feeling like it is like happening actually on stage, and like that's I think looking at it through that way, especially me being a person who loves movies and not thinking about it that way, coming into it and then having to, okay, is this theater? Does this feel like it's actually theater? Like that completely blew my mind and changed the way I saw theater as a whole. Yeah.
I think a little bit of kind of like going off of a little bit of what you were saying, Barbie, like, is this my story? One of the most important things I've learned through being a director is like that it's such a great privilege to get to tell stories and to be the kind of keepers of a culture, but that privilege comes with such a deep responsibility.
Yeah.
And this need to always remember that like bodies on stage carry meaning, right? And like to use that responsibly. And thinking back to some of my times as an actor where I felt like that privilege wasn't held with care, like, is actually what really made me want to be a director, and want to be able to take that responsibility and to like treat it preciously.
Yeah.
That's so beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you for saying
Okay, last question. Just to, you know, be mindful of your time. What is a ritual that sets you up for the work? Is there a ritual that you have before every rehearsal? Is there a ritual that you have before you begin, whenever it is? What is something that is a ritual that you do to like get into the space of being a director?
I think what I do, I ask myself how I'm doing, you know, and how I'm coming into the work, and then I ask all my collaborators how they're feeling, and we have like a little 3 to 5 minute discussion just about our days, and I think it's really helpful to know how we're coming in, so then we can leave it behind, you know?
Yeah.
Because I think if I'm bringing in a lot of stress from the day as a director, and then I don't have a chance to just air it out and let it come out, then the whole rehearsal I'm going to be feeling that way. And I feel the same way as an actor as well. And so I learned that from a really great director. But I do it on every single one of my rehearsals where we have the little short discussion, and then we're able to, okay, now we can leave that, whether it's positive or negative or anything, we're leaving that there so then we can focus on the work. But we let it all out, and we also like open with vulnerability, so then we can kind of keep that sense of vulnerability throughout the process. Yeah.
That's lovely. I think I misunderstood your question. I thought you meant like before the process begins.
Any.
Oh, okay. I think checking in is super important, and also being able to remember to bring our shared humanity into the room, like why we tell stories, is something that at least I just wrapped a production, and we always have that little check-in time, and that was very precious to me, and just made me feel seen and made me feel held in the room, and yeah, I think that's something I always hold on to.
Yeah, of course.
Similarly, I also like to have, maybe some like breathing or a feeling of like, oh, how were our days today? Like, what weight do we feel? Like, how can we maybe release that and like feel free in this space, in this moment, and this feeling of like being together in this moment. And then before the process even begins, I love to like think ahead to opening night. Like I love to take a moment to sort of manifest like that night and the excitement of that night, and to sort of snap a little picture in my head of like what that will be, and then just like wear that with me through the process.
Yeah.
I love that. Thank you all for joining us for the conversation today. I'm so grateful that we have gotten to collaborate all year together, and I look forward to many future collaborations with each of you.
Thank you.
Yay.
Thank you for
Thank
having
you.
us.
Thank
you,
Yes.
Seth.